Good afternoon, Esther.
Good afternoon, Francis and Doris. Very nice to see you here.
It's nice to be here. But we're looking for some education here, you see, because you've had experiences that none of us have had, huh? And that is your whole ashram connection before coming to Auroville. So if you could tell us how you entered into Mother's world and how you proceeded, huh?
Francis, you asked me a question that takes me on a long journey. You began by saying, what's your experience in the Mother's world? And the Mother's world began for me when I was 7 and 8 years old. My parents used to come to the ashram. Shobindo was there, and they were deeply interested in pursuing this path of yoga. And there were no children in the ashram at that time. This was around 1940. And me and my younger brother, we came, and Mother said to my parents, you bring the children and come here. So that's how we were there. And the ashram only had about 300 very senior and intensely concentrated disciples who had only one focus in their whole life, to follow a path that Sri Aurobindo was walking on and exploring, and to see where they could go with that spiritual master. Strangely enough, even at that young age, one did not feel awed by the atmosphere, did not find it overpowering. One just moved in there into the life of the ashram at that age. And because there were no other children, Mother had all the time in the world to give us. Once she accepted children in that fold, they almost became her focus. And we were like living with our natural mother and father, but the mother was in our lives just like our natural mother and more so. And all the other senior people, after the first surprise of having children in their midst, they gave us so much love and affection and the part of their being. You felt they were pouring it into us like we were empty jars at that moment. And what shall one say of the mother? She took us up as entire little beings. She took up charge of us physically, spiritually, in terms of education. It was like she was molding the personality, and she wanted to start young. She later did say that's why she started taking children. And there was no school at the time, we were too few. So she arranged for us to have private classes with some of the teachers. But it was the fact that she used to receive us 3-4 times a day, look at us, talk to us, and by the time we were 12, she was already giving us guidance in words. Before that, it was just the contact with her consciousness and its action on us, which we knew nothing of, but we loved being with her. You could feel her love, her presence, her power. You knew it was not what you saw around, but Francis, you can't imagine, for us that was the only life we knew. There were no comparisons because we didn't know anything else. And I remember when I was very young, I think just about 9, she gave me the work of working in the flower service. And on all fours, I used to go around the courtyard of what is now known as the inner courtyard of the ashram around the samadhi, pick up flowers from the service tree, count them, count even the buds because that was a special flower, write on a piece of paper the number we had counted each day, like it was 1,347 or whatever, arrange them in platters, and they were taken up by the most senior people of the service to Sri Aurobindo's room. So that was the first work she gave me. And then she gave me the name. But the name given by my father to me was Mira. So one day when I went up to her, she said, "Oh, I've got a name for you." The name was Aster. She taught me how to pronounce it. She wrote it down for me. She gave me its significance as given by her, which was transparency. And she said, "I'm giving you this name as a French name, Aster. Don't let anyone call you Aster in the Englishman." I was fine, so that's the name I've grown up with. When we were a few children, like 10 or 12, she said, "Now we'll start a school." As simple as that. Everything grew from an organic need. So she started a school with 10 or 12 children. There were 3 teachers. My mother was one of them, was a trained teacher. And we had 1 classroom and no books. But we had mother. She said, "I'll guide you." And the way she got our little classes together and told the teachers how to handle the students, and from the age of around 12, every time we went to her, in a kind of periodicity of 2 to 3 months, she had 2 things to say to us. One was, find your psychic being. We hadn't a notion what was the psychic being. But something, somewhere, her consciousness obviously wanted our personality to be connected with it. And we used to come downstairs after seeing her up there, radiant, but we didn't know what it was all about. And the second thing she added was be conscious. And she used to say this on intervals about 2 or 3 months, right through our growing up. She worked out our subjects, but to be with her was like being with a great consciousness that enveloped you, that penetrated into you, and that was kind of recreating you. And I must say that the darshan of Sri Aurobindo 4 times a year was, since the age of 12 or 13, was for me the most important event. As children we used to go for darshan with our parents so that we'd be quiet and we'd go in a line and you wouldn't make any noise. But very soon I wanted to stand alone before Sri Aurobindo. So I told my parents that I will not make a noise, I will not break the line, but I have to go alone. And that's how I used to go. In those days, Dilip Kumar Roy, the famous musician, used to live there. And one day by chance I happened to be behind him in the queue. And when you were in front of Sri Aurobindo, he sat with the majesty of a king. It was not even king, it was an absolute. At that age you did not know the word absolute, but you felt it was just it. And he always had a very deep impersonal look. He never focused a look of recognition on anyone who passed in front of him. And you could look into his eyes and you went in and in some way you got lost. Even at that age, that was what it felt like. But when Dilip Kumar Roy was in front of him, his look at the same time, without losing the impersonal grandeur of it, focused into a look of recognition on seeing him. And there was such a vibration of love and ecstasy that went through, which was incredible, because they had a very special relationship. So once when I came upon this by sheer chance, I devised a little game for myself. I would wait at the main gate of the ashram for Dilip Kumar Roy to enter. When he would take his place in the queue, I'd slip in behind him. You know, he came with his flowing saffron robes and, you know, I mean, he knew me as a child of the ashram, and I slipped in quietly before him, behind him, and he didn't even notice. I was so quiet because I just wanted to be there. You know, nobody really paid attention. And then as you enter the long room, at the end of which Mother and Shabinda would be seated on a couch, you know, you could, as a younger and smaller person, you could peer a bit to the right and a bit to the left and look at Shabinda so much longer. And then when Dilip Kumar Rai was there, to feel what went between them, that is what helped. So I did that for many years, right till 1950. This was life. This was my way. Yeah, but this was life, that's all. And then things happened, you know. When I was 15, one day Mother said, I want you to teach. I said, Mother, I'm studying. She said, you can do both. I said, I don't know how to teach. She said, I'll tell you, I'll show you. She never took no for an answer. Never. And yet when something was not quite right to me, she was very firm also, very firm. So she gave me a class of 5-year-olds. And she asked me to bring them to her every day, so that she would tell me what is each child like, what's his temperament, how to deal with him. So she guided me through these students for some time like that. And actually, while I was there, I've been teaching all my life. So as I grew up, my students become older also. But that was always part of one's life according with others. And she gave you different work at different times. But the way she guided a growing person, you know, you go through your growing age, you go through adolescence, you go through everything. You have everything to deal with like any young person. And we were freer to go to her than to our own parents. You could talk to her about anything. And her guidance, you could feel, came from the height at which she was. And yet what she told you was so practical, something that you, a person at that stage of one's life, in those circumstances, in that situation, could actually live out. That's something which has always remained with me, that over there, but it was one continuum from the heights to the most practical thing in life. And that's where I think this thing sank home, that to talk of the spiritual and the material as two separate things, that's not a fact. Because we saw it doing it year after year after year, our whole life. From there, she knew how to deal with the little things, human relationships, of this, that, customs, you know, the whole gamut of life. And she brought you up in tremendous freedom, but the being centered within. She brought up everyone in tremendous freedom, but with the being and the personality centered within. That was the secret of that freedom. That was, and she made it very clear to us that true freedom only comes when we are rooted within, not otherwise. And she helped each aspect of your personality to grow. When she saw a possibility, or each soul has its own line of destiny, she guided you, she told you what to do. And somehow with me at every stage of life, she always spoke about what I was to do a few years hence, a few years hence. And the last was a long interview in '71, which I think was a program for the whole of the life that remained, or several lives, I don't really know. But, you know, Francis, I could talk on forever and ever, so somewhere I must jump a lot. But I must say that, you know, she was never the same on two occasions that you met her. One was love, immense grace, beauty. The way she gave you that feeling of beauty and guided you in your life of how to imbibe it, how to deal with it. Like she put me in Golconda to live there, to experience what was there. So while I was a student, I was living there actually. And yet, when need be, the kind of strength that she could show, the firmness if you needed to be corrected. She was very firm also. And always that height. Except at darshan times, she was another being. When she sat by Sri Aurobindo, it was not the mother that we used to meet every day. You know, you used to look at her and say, now this is another being. But there was never, never any sense of distance, either with her or with Sri Aurobindo. I didn't feel that. Never. Someone intensely close to you. And well, she gave me different kinds of work to do, to give me a training, give me an opportunity. And much later in life, I saw what was the usefulness of that training, of the particular work that she gave you to do. Well, at a certain stage, I must say before that, the period of 1955, 56, 57, when the supramental descent manifestation took place in 56. That was a very rich period. And she communicated a lot to us, both of them. We did not understand it, but we felt the power of that moment. We felt that something very special was being done, was happening. And whenever you had some experience like that, you took it to her. Because I, for one, have always been one who wants to be sure that an experience is genuine. Otherwise, better not to have it. So I would take it to her and ask her, Mother, look, is this right or not? So she would say, yes, it is, or whatever she had to say about it. Till slowly she tried to indicate how to have that test of authenticity by oneself, without having to refer it to her all the time. But the manner in which about any, what you call a spiritual experience, was concrete, authentic, specific, and related to the most material in life, that gap was always there. That, not gap, that continuum was always there. And that's one thing which I felt even from a very young age, because to my being that was important. For me, the spiritual was something which was part of life. That's why maybe I came there at the young age that I did. Then at one stage, I felt that I wanted to read I read Sri Aurobindo in our setting of the Ashram Center of Education, but I also wanted to read him in the setting of European thought and culture. And my feeling was that one's education and upbringing is not complete if one does not have both the Indian and the European half. So I took it to Mother, like we took everything else, and if it was wrong, she told you so. She liked it. She said, where do you want to go? And I didn't know much French, but I can't say what prompted me. My first impulse was Paris, Sorbonne. She was very happy, because I was the first of the students from our center to go out for further studies. And we had no examinations that we passed, we had no diplomas, no degrees, just a course of work. And here I was ready to go to the Sorbonne. She was very happy. And well, she asked me what the arrangements were, we worked out, and I had those years of studying there. And I guess that's where I'll make the jump into Auroville. I used to visit home every year and a half, because beyond that lap of time, it was too much to stay away. So this was sometime in '69. I was about to finish my work. I was not here in '68 when Auroville was founded by the mother. I was in Paris with a student upheaval going on at that time. And Mother said very quietly, as soon as you finish your work in Paris, you will know what it is. I'll let you know. that was enough guidance. We didn't need more. And sure enough, I had a letter sent on her behalf by Monsieur André, who was handling her foreign correspondence, saying that the United Nations in New York, nobody in Auroville knows about it. France is the first time I'm talking about it. It said the United Nations is celebrating its 25th anniversary, which was July 1970. And the United Nations had decided to invite young university people, I was one of them at the time, from all over the world, and give them the free run of the UN for 3 weeks. And they wanted them to talk about education, politics, culture, economics, to hear what their ideas and their vision of the future was. That's why I was glad to hear that you're having the young Aurovillians on the same thing. And the senior diplomats were not supposed to come into those halls. It was just a forum where we would put out our ideas, and the elder people would later note them down and see what kind of a future is envisioned. And this was the group that had gone through 68. So this letter said that Mother wants Auroville to be represented in that assembly, and she has thought of you to be there. I said, I don't know Auroville. I mean, I'd heard account from friends about the foundation ceremony, the inauguration. But then, Shobindu I was studying, so you had an idea of what Auroville was about, even without having been here really. And we were about 1,500 people in the UN from all over the world. And one had to go as part of the official Indian delegation. You couldn't go as a private person. And it was not easy at that stage, it was a bit late in the day, to have me accredited to the Indian delegation. But Mother has her ways. She sent Udar or somebody up to Delhi. Indraji was there, so she said, look, somebody from here must go. So she had it all worked out from here. And I was told that Janet, who was on a holiday in Iceland or wherever her home is, would be in New York, and she'd be bringing me some literature from Auroville. That's how I arrived there. And I was an alternate delegate who could really be, you see how she works, who could only act in the absence of the full-fledged delegation. Because I was brought in at the last minute. It was like, being shoved in. So from the station, I arrived at the UN, and I was told that it was my first visit to the US, and I was told that the Asian caucus was voting for members because they were going to vote for an 18-member steering committee to guide the whole thing. And no one from India had arrived because the delegation was held up in the middle of July in London due to fog. Fog in July, and it was held up for 2 days until everything got sorted out. So I was the only one, and I had full rights of a delegate. I've never seen something like that. I just walked into the hall. I was literally walked in where everyone sat, and all the bench of India was empty. And it was in session. It was the last minute before the voting actually begins. And Auroville has given me an experience in public life. At that time, I didn't have it. So, I was working in the libraries in the Sorbonne. My work was of a different kind. And suddenly, there was a bit of discussion with the Pakistani delegate, and we didn't shoot. But the result was that India was voted to the steering committee. And the way the whole thing went, I've never seen Mother's hand in action on a wide world stage like that. But there was nothing, every little thing was in place. And well, then the 3 weeks went on, and that was my first introduction to Auroville. When I came back, I said, Mother, I finished my work, now what do? I was going to resume my teaching and a bit of writing and the work that I did, and very happy to be back. Because by that time I was quite clear that the creative period of human culture lay in Sri Aurobindo's work and here in India. So I had no urge to stay back, which I could have. I was very clear about what I wanted. And my own inner urge, that was there. But even in this sense of the outer development of cultural, civilizational patterns in the world as a whole, even they became very clear by 69, 70, sitting right in Europe. Today, of course, they are more than evident. And when I came back, I said, Mother, what do I do? She said, but the indication has been given to you. That's where the Auroville journey started. It took time, Francis. I was interested that what has Mother started as Auroville? Asha was practically born in. But when Mother starts something, it's something to know, to explore. So I used to come here, and this place where we're sitting now, which is so green, was totally barren. It was red sand with big canyons and not a blade of grass. That's how I first landed here. And I came with Roji and Prem in their white wagon. I think my father was with us. And the atmosphere was very unusual, very new. It was Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's fold. And yet there was a newness in it which I could not understand, but it was very attractive. But the process was not easy because my home was there physically, materially, and spiritually, in every way, and I was very happy. But the prodding was there, within. Everyone said, but that's your indication. And it took time. It took time. But I must say, so many years down the line, Auroville as a field of experience is so unbelievably rich, unbelievably challenging, unbelievably difficult, but very, very rich. And nothing like this is happening around the world. There are communities, there are experiments that have come up in recent years, but not the dynamism of their force which is active. And the world comes home to roost, where it is being gelled, metamorphosed into a collective that you don't have anywhere. And if you want to learn, what you can learn here is incredible. And if you really want to grow in consciousness, the possibilities are immense. That is so anywhere. But Auroville is an exceptional field. And wherever you are in Mother's world, you're always working in matter, whether you are in the ashram or here or anywhere else. But in Auroville, it's another kind of matter that you seem to touch at points. And that's interesting. But for me, I must say that the kind of experience that my being has always sought when I became a little more conscious and adult, in the sphere of that experience, this growing up as I did in the ashram with Mother and Sri Aurobindo there, and the experience of Auroville as a field, I see it as a very special morphogenetic field of human evolution. And I've sensed it in very specific manners. So this totality is a special grace. And for me, it's got the stamp of completeness.
When did you actually move here? I mean, you were going back and forth for a long period of time as they were trying to get this together for you, the
I
house?
think around 78.
About 78.
About that time.
So that was like right after the difficulties began.
No, but I was in and out right through the difficulties because the place was not ready. But I was, as you said, going back and forth right through the period of the difficulties.
Did this put a strain or pressure on you, the difficulties that were taking place?
It was.
I'm sure.
It was very, very, very difficult. First, I did not really know this experience at that time. And one did not quite know what kind of transformation Auroville was meant to serve. You know, we all had to find things out as we moved on. Nobody knew. We still don't know what's going to come. We don't. You know, we can't say what is going to be the final is a big word, the final result of this evolution, but even what are going to be the next few steps or the next few achievements, we can't really say till we are there. One can have a very general sense of direction, but no more than that. So that was a very difficult time. Because somewhere I was totally part of one world, and here was another world I could sense, which was wanting to emerge, wanting to create. But the whole thing was surrounded in so much tension and difficulty and misunderstanding. And quite frankly, if the mother had not sustained me, not just inwardly, but in every sense of the word, I do not think I had it in my personality to go through that period. But I don't know how she held me up. She kept me like a life buoy. I don't know how or why, Francis, that I can't say. But she did. Otherwise, I wouldn't be where I am today.
None of us would be. When we made this move away from the Shurban society, as you said, it was all misunderstandings and one faux pas after another. I mean, but at the time, we here in our naivete had this belief of truth was on our side situation. We believed that truth was on our side, and we were like mother's warriors, you see. And of course, there was all this vital energy. But
Francis, it's very hard to talk in any specific manner about that time. And I'll tell you why. As you grow in experience, you realize that truth itself, what is it? How many sides are there to it? How many facets, directions? It's not an absolute thing and all else is false. What I did sense at that moment was that, I'll tell you, maybe I was naive too. I said that, look, here are people who have come from all over the world. They're seeking something. There's a, urge to seek the new world and kind of not live in the manner of the old. And at that time, what I saw most strongly was the sense of control, of possession, of wanting to have everything in your own hands. That to me, instinctively, because that's my nature, was not right. I mean, they had to be given a chance to work out, which doesn't mean that there weren't wrong things on all sides. No. I mean, looking back, I can say that. But what seemed to me is that, look, there are a lot of people from the world who'd come. And 73, when the mother had left the body, so the chance to flower out had to be given. But here were a lot of impositions, which even in a human sense didn't seem right to me. You know, that's how I saw it, and that's how I was in it. I said, look, they have to be given a chance, and nobody can impose. And the kind of guidance that was needed could be obtained either by an inner feeling and presence and guidance of the mother from within, or as friends, you know, by a sharing. But by imposition, that's been against the grain of my personality. So that thing wasn't right for me.
And then you started living here on a full-time basis, huh? I mean, you still go back to Pandi to visit?
No, I do. I do.
Okay.
For one thing,
But there was a shift.
what the ashram holds, and what I have lived through, it's not known to a lot of people, most people who come here. So if they don't feel its attraction, its value, and what it gives them, I understand that. But I know what it gives me. And that is my spiritual base. And for me, the spiritual and the material have never been two separate things, Francis. And it was also my physical base. And I mean, the kind of consciousness put in that atmosphere and in the ground by Sri Aurobindo and the mother, once you've known it and it's there, living and getting more and more concrete, that is kind of, to me, it's a strong spiritual supportive base for experiment of our own. Otherwise, the mother, with the divine Shakti, part of the evolutionary force, could work on the world as it is. Why have an Auroville? Why have people come here? If to me it has always seemed that a sheer physical proximity to where they've lived and found their base, dug their base, that has been a hell. I've always been conscious of that. Even at times when I know it wasn't understood by a lot of people, but thing for me was so clear and strong. It didn't matter because Francis, for me since I was very young, I've sought a certain experience and a fullness of that experience. And whether people around understood or not, happily has not mattered much. For the time being, for a moment, doesn't change, happily. Because one goes through a lot of it. But one has to be sure inwardly and of knowing what the mother and Sri Aurobindo are doing to you as one individual, what's your part. That's important. And to me, the two have been essential elements of this growth, with what I have grown up with at the ashram as base that holds it. There's no doubt about that.
How beautiful. Yeah.
There was a time when the back and forth was difficult. Auroville was trying to find itself, and but now that Auroville has become more mature, the transition and the link is easy. That everyone feels it, in fact. There was a time when Auroville had to discover its own grounding, its own footing. And I think it's been a very special privilege of this life of mine, where I've been at the ashram in the days when it was being formed. You know, there were no departments or school when I came there as a child. So we saw how mother set them up, how she would do Golconda, set up an engineering department like Harpako, the school, the embroidery, the this, you know, how she would set up all the physical education activities in the playground. She would come and spend 6 hours every evening with us. And then to see Auroville grow up. I mean, to have seen both in that phase, I mean, what could be richer in life? What could be richer? And then you realize truth is many-sided. It's many-sided and people play their roles. I mean, even those who offer opposition, who represent or embody the forces of the past, sometimes I see it now with hindsight and in a general way, that they must hold a more difficult karma. You know, to be enamored of the future and move towards it, you have everyone's praise. But to hold the forces of the past, which are entrenched, and offer yourself for battle, it must be much harder. Much harder. But it's taken me quite a bit of experience and maturity to realize that fact. In general, that to hold the forces of the past and you don't move, that's another story. But where you hold the forces of the past and engage with those who move to the future, to offer yourself to that kind of a struggle, you must be really a warrior, because that's not easy, because you get nothing but blame, and it's tough. But somewhere in that soul there must be the satisfaction that I'm helping the future to grow.
Speaking of the future, in the early 80s, when we had the administrator here, Mr. Oja, and the beginning of the formation of the Auroville Foundation, you were very instrumental, I understand, in getting doors open in Delhi to receive the representatives from Auroville.
No, we were a task force, Francis, if you remember rightly. You know, we used to go to Delhi between the two, between the period of the emergency, the end of the ordinances and the beginning of the foundation. But remember, the Foundation Act was written by somebody else. There was a team of 6, 7 who were known as the task force. We used to go just to see that if the act is passed, at least the board ought to be constituted. You know, we waited for about 3-4 years when nothing would happen. We were in a limbo. We were neither here nor there. But I can't say that I was instrumental in getting the doors open, quite frankly. You forget Prem was there. And they were all our big old-timers, Frederick and Alain, Krishan Tiwari and Thwan and a few others. So I have a feeling a little bit like the icing on the cake, quite frankly, because I was not really in public life, except that my family comes from Delhi and once in a while you know somebody, or I've always been one, if I believe in something, I have no hesitation to talk about it. You know, I think that was frankly the only thing I could do, and sometimes I didn't even speak at that time. All that came to me much later in my life in Auroville. So I used to go up to Delhi, yes, but I don't think I was instrumental in anything. They were more the others who would do that.
The others I know were instrumental in the creation or the writing of the foundation and working out all the commas and the periods involved. But you're credited with the door opening. The door openings to get into see this minister or get into breakfast gardens with the Prime Minister and stuff like this.
But do you know, oh, I think you're talking of Rajiv Gandhi.
Yes, yes.
Well, I happen to have an old friend who was then not in politics, who was then in the services, but who was at school and university with him. So it kind of helped to get a meeting.
Yes.
But what we were doing at that time was presenting Siru and our educational projects.
Yes,
It was not so much the foundation, because that had to be done more at the ministerial level. And quite frankly, none of us had any contact, Francis, you know that? We pushed our way through as a team. I remember one meeting with Prime Minister Morarji Desai. Maybe this is not for record, I don't know. We had no appointment, he wouldn't see us. And his private secretary said, you wait, maybe if he has the time. We waited 6 to 7 hours in an antechamber, all of us. He said, and the person who was the most adamant was Thwan. They said, no, we're not going till we see him. And we just waited. So there were, I mean, all kinds of things. But I really don't know. No, I didn't really, except that one occasion. The rest I didn't know.
But the Auroville Foundation came into being, and then you played a part in this, no?
No, I didn't.
Yes.
That's again one of the big stories. If I tell you the real story, that better not go around. But I'll only say this, since you asked the question in a pointed manner. This must have been sometime in November 1990. The first board was constituted third week of January 91. Again, a group of us were in Delhi, same people, saying that, look, do something, it's about time, and we are waiting, we're neither here nor there, we don't have the administrators, we don't have the foundation. And I was just around. I was not so much in the collective life of Auroville at that time, as you know. And I won't get names, but there were people who were very clear whom they wanted to be on the board, and etc., etc. They're drawing up lists, and the lists were sent to the ministry, and I was watching because I had no sense of being related to that board or the foundation of it. Because first there would be personalities from India. I didn't know who were coming. And Francis, I don't believe it's for us to suggest names. I've always believed that India, as she hosts Auroville, it's her soul that's in connection with what's happening here. And that soul knows who are the people needed at a given moment. At a given moment, they play their role and they go away. So you don't have to propose. It's against my nature to do that. Unless there's a special case where you feel somebody would be very good for Auroville. That's exceptional. And that happened perhaps much later. Not certain at that time, I was totally unconcerned about it. And there were people like, you know, the group who used to go to the task force. They were the ones who were in the forefront, so to speak. And we just said that and came back. And when I got a telephone call, third week of January, and I heard of the whole list, that's totally different to the list that had been written down and proposed by I will not tell you who. As though the divine had reversed it like that. And when they said, your name is there, I said, you must be mad. I said, but how come? You know, you'll have to believe it. I haven't a clue to this day. When I checked out later, what I learned was that what the ministry normally does is get a list of people who they think are likely. And they try to find out what have they done in their life, what's their background, their studies or their work. Somehow in those listings, they must have picked up my name as having grown up in the ashram, worked on Sri Aurobindo studies, taught and whatever. And it must have come up. I haven't a clue.
But you've been...
These are the facts.
Yeah, okay.
It's interesting that you are asking me, and I'm very happy to put it on record.
But then again, I mean, you've been associated with the Auroville Foundation for a long period of time. You see. And you've been a member of the governing board for several times there, you see. And so you and the other members of the governing board definitely have an influence on the direction of Auroville. I mean, yes, I go so far as say influence. I'm not saying...
Francis, I'll tell you how I've always seen my role when it came. In the beginning, I didn't really know how to handle it. But I've gained an experience. But I was very clear about one thing. For one thing, we all know Auroville is not something to be governed by no matter who. It is not a question of administration either. That we do ourselves. If the divine had thought it fit to put me there, which is exactly as it was. I can tell you the first stretch was very difficult, very difficult from many angles. It was to make Auroville and the experiment understood to personalities from India, to governmental structures from India, and vice versa, to make those structures a little understood by us and to see if we could not work together by changing something or the other. So in a sense, for me, it was a little bit, but the kind of work that the task force involved, except that this was more intensive and certainly more focused and demanding more time. And where I was playing a role as an individual. I was not part of a team where the others were playing the main role. I was just around, to be quite frank. But here I was playing a role as an individual. But from that day to today, I'm very clear about this. And to the best of my understanding, I've played only this role. How Auroville can be better understood and have a better goodwill in the country as a whole. And with time, obviously, my own contacts in India have also grown. And especially with the government structure that is behind the board itself. The board does not consist of government people. I mean, I know a little bit of the mentality of government structures because in my larger family, I have a number of people who are part of the government service or have been. Not that they play a direct role because they're in other areas, but I know what that bureaucratic mentality is like. So it is try to make a bridge between the two. And somehow, right till today, that work falls on my lap. They're trying to create a bridge and understanding because I do believe that we cannot continue to grow wherever we are unless we work with the structures of that country. And by and large, these structures are similar with some differences. So wherever you are, these structures have to be worked with. So I'm played that, I have been given that role, and I tell you, it's not easy at times, I can assure you, but there are two things in it. I do it as one of the bits of work that's been given to me at a given moment. When it's given to me, I do it. When it's not given to me, I have so many other things to do. And I move into them and I have more time for them. But somewhere to make Auroville understood in India, I feel good about that. And that is, I tell you, whether I'm associated directly with the foundation and its board at a given moment or not, I still keep doing it.
Let me ask you another pointed question then. Are you going to continue being associated with the governing board?
I have no idea.
Well, there's a rumor that you're resigning or retiring from the governing board.
I have no idea. You know what, Francis, I have not even thought about it.
Great. Good.
I have not even thought about it. I'll tell you why. In one of the terms, I did resign mid-term because I felt that the bureaucratic side was giving me not enough time with my inner life. And that is the first thing. I resigned at that moment. Then there was a gap. When it came to me again, I was wondering, what should I do? And I said, maybe the experience is such that I can sail through that strata of bureaucracy and not let it impinge on me. So I must say the last 4 years have been that kind of effort. And I have not even thought about the future. I haven't. I have no idea who is going to be nominated by the ministry and who will be there or not and whether I'll be there or not. I have not thought of it. Till I'm there, I do my work. That's it. You know, I don't, Francis, I've never taken life as something, I want this, or I want that, or I don't want this. I've never lived life like that. When we were very young and we had that direct physical access to the mother, we used to write a letter, go and speak to her and tell her, mother, shall I do this? After 73, it has always been looking for inner guidance and to the best of my own ability to receive it, for everything that comes, I look for that guidance. If that guidance is do a thing, I go ahead. If it is don't do it, I don't do.
One moment. How we take that? Yeah, fine.
But I have another pen.
Okay, okay. Ask them personal, so if you don't want to, it's okay. But here you had this physical contact as a young girl growing up in the aura of the mother and was constantly receiving her love. Huh? And the mother or those around her always spoke about the mother working on the transformation of the cells. You see. And even though, I mean, I came in '68 and I was told that the mother was in this process and that the death aspect was not going to take place, that she was not going to pass on. So in '73 I was very, very traumatized basically when mother left her body. And so I was wondering yourself, I mean, you've had this loving contact, grew up with this woman, had this rich experience.
You mean with mother?
With mother. And then all of a sudden mother left her body. You see. I was wondering, how did you handle this? How did you?
I'm glad you asked me this question. For all of us who came to the ashram like I did and grew up, as anyone can imagine, that must have been a very difficult transition. Sri Aurobindo's leaving the body was itself a difficult one, but we were very young. For the older people, that was another experience. But mother was there, and mother leaving the body. I can only say this. The evening of, it was not the 17th of November, I was outside, I wasn't here, I was here on the 18th. As I stood there, inwardly, the feeling was that nothing had changed. And that is something which has to be deeply lived or it can't happen if one has gone through the kind of life that many of us did. And then on the 20th, when mother's body was put into the samadhi along with Sri Aurobindo's, which was there in another world, it was a very powerful experience that some work had been done. I had no idea what, but the sense of something achieved. Now, as the time went past, you found that the inner guidance was available in such abundance that whereas we thought we couldn't speak to her or write to her, she gave us something else in it. And this is speaking not for everyone, but certainly for a lot of us, me and some of my friends, we have talked to each other about it. And somewhere she started a work on the physical, which I had not gone through before, quite frankly. During the '60s, I was not here, for one thing. It started at that time. And she gave of herself in such abundance, in so many ways, that she hasn't let us feel that we don't have that connection. But having known the physical connection that we did, that stands as a thing of unbelievable karma and strength and beauty. But after '73, she's given of herself in so many ways. So many ways, and in such fullness and in such detail. That's all.
Thank you very much, Aster.
Thank you very much, my God. You know.